Ralle and Bolle. We had a lot of fun with these two fluffy hamsters in 3 funny short films. And now you can too, because from now on they are available to download for anyone who wants to animate a film with them. In this video we show you how to get them onto your computer, what their special features are and how character animation works. First, go to our website and download Ralle and Bolle. You will find the link below the video in the description. If you don't have Blender on your computer yet, download the version that is compatible with your operating system from blender.org. The link is also in the description. Important for those who already have Blender, Ralle and Bolle require Blender version 4.5 or higher. After installing Blender if necessary and then starting it, open ralle.blend. Here we can see our character in the main window and view it from all sides by clicking the middle mouse button. To move around the room, press Shift. If you want to move closer to Ralle or further away, use the mouse wheel. You should practice this a little because you will be flying around your character a lot when you animate it. And I recommend another special setting in Blender. Normally the camera zooms in on the center of the image. However, you can set it so that the zoom moves toward or away from the mouse pointer. To do this, go to Edit, Preferences, Navigation, and under Zoom select Zoom to Mouse Position and close the window again. Now you can control where your camera zooms to. Now let's move on to Ralle's face. The shape keys are already open in the right panel and mouth shut is selected. If you now increase its value from 0 to 1, Ralle closes his mouth. With mouth angry, he pulls the corners of his mouth down. With eyes sad, he gets sad eyes. All of these shape keys can also be overlaid. I'll show you how it's done. This makes Ralle look pretty exhausted. If we now set a keyframe for all changed shape keys, to do this we click on the keyframe symbol to the right of them, then jump to frame 20 in the timeline and reassign the value 0 to it and set it as a keyframe, we have a smooth animation of Ralle's facial features. Before we move on to the body animation, I'll delete the keyframes again. Let's take a closer look at Ralle's rig. To do this, we select the black lines around our hamster and, because we want to move them, we change the interaction mode to pose mode. Since his ear has just been selected and rotate is active in the tools on the left, I'll show you the axis of rotation. X, Y and Z. And if you click in the circle between the axes, you can move the ear like a trackball. To reset the change, simply press Alt-R and the ear is back to its original state. Let's move on from rotation to movement. Yes, you can also move the ear, but that doesn't make much sense. I'll reset it again with Alt-G and select Ralle's right hand. I can also move it along the 3 axes X, Y and Z, or on the respective planes, the YZ plane for example, as shown here in red. Let's take a look at his hips. They work the same way. Here are 2 more important shortcuts. Press R to rotate the selected controller on the screen level and press G to move it on that level. If you add one of the axes X, Y or Z to R or G using a key, you can rotate and move along that axis. This allows you to move each character into the desired pose relatively quickly. Okay, let's bring Ralle back to the beginning. I'll show you his feet now and, very importantly, the root controller that moves Ralle completely. This makes it easy to get him at his starting position. To keep track of everything, press N and you will find the rig layers on the right side of the window. Here you can hide arms or legs, ears or even the root, depending on what you want to animate. I'm going to hide everything except the arms. Now everything looks much clearer. Here I can move the hand back and forth, but it always remains attached to this square. In addition, I can rotate his elbow back and forth using the two arrows. The joints of Ralle's arm are then calculated automatically. This is called inverse kinematics, or IK for short, and is particularly useful for animations in which the hands are attached to something, such as a table or a door. However, if you simply want them to hang down, detached in the air, forward kinematics, FK, is more suitable. To do this, we switch to FK in the rig layers, and instead of the red controllers, we get these green circles, similar to Ralle's bones. However, nothing happens when we move them. To do this, we have to set the IK-FK value from 0 to 1. Now Ralle's arm can be moved like a doll's and stays in this pose even when I move his hips. It often happens that you have to switch from FK to IK. Let's set a keyframe here at frame 20. To do this, I select the 3 FK controllers and press K for keyframe and R for rotate. At frame 0, we go to the initial state. To do this, I turn on auto keying and press Alt-R to reset the rotation at this frame. Now we have a nice animation of Ralle's arm. After this, I turn the IK controllers back on. Here we also have to animate the IK-FK value so that it changes from 1 to 0 at frame 20. To do this, we select the gear on Ralle's shoulder, go to the beginning of our animation, right-click on the IK-FK value and select Insert Keyframe. To keep the value constant at 1 until the next keyframe, we right-click on the bottom keyframe in the timeline and select Interpolation Mode, Constant. Now we go to frame 20 and set the value to 0. We see that Ralle's hand suddenly jumps back to the beginning, which is not what we want. This is because the IK controllers are still at the beginning. However, in order to continue from the current position, I first have to click the IK to FK button. This jumps the IK controller to the position of the FK controller, and from here I can continue animating. For example, I go to frame 40 and move the hand slightly to the right, adjust the elbow, and we have a smooth FK-IK animation. Switching back works the same way. First set the IK-FK value back to 1 and then click the FK to IK button. Now the FK controllers are active again. The same applies to the legs. However, you will rarely need to switch there as Ralle is mostly bound to the ground. For all other controllers, I'll leave it up to you to figure out how they affect Ralle's body. Just one more thing. How do Ralle's fingers work? To find out, we switch to the fingers in the rig layers and get these orange controllers. Like Ralle's ear, these can rotate in all directions. But if we want to bend them, we use the scale tool or the shortcut S. If we want to mirror a specific body posture, such as his index finger on Ralle's other side, we can do so by right-clicking, copy pose, right-clicking again, paste pose X flipped. To animate Ralle's fist, we first give all fingers a keyframe at frame 0 with K and select rotate and scale. Then we go to frame 20 with auto key turned on, bend all his fingers using scaling and rotate them around the X-axis until they are nicely closed. Pretty simple, right? Now I'll show you how to add Bolle to Ralle. To do this, we turn the root layer back on and move Ralle 1 hamster width to the left. Then we'll switch back from pose mode to object mode, click once in the empty space so that nothing is selected, and collapse Ralle in the outliner. Now go to File, Append, double-click Ralle.blend, click Collection, select Bolle and click Append. Now Ralle and Bolle are in your scene. I'll turn off Bolle's glasses for now and position him a little bit further to the right in pose mode. Here you can see in the rig layers that Bolle is structured in exactly the same way as Ralle. All animation types work the same way for him as they do for Ralle. And with that, I hope you enjoy using them. I would love to hear about your first attempts and maybe even see some of your own little films. Feel free to write us in the comments. Take care and see you next time.